I appreciate you all having me here tonight. I've actually been on tour around the state all this week doing the show from different cities around North Carolina. And I just came today. I passed up the opportunity to have dinner with Elizabeth Dole. Darn. I could probably script what she would have said, and it would have been through this. And the whole time I would have been like this. Because I don't know, I may be out on a limb here, but I'm thinking you, like me, don't trust Republicans anymore than you trust Democrats when it comes to budget.
Yeah.
That's right, because they smile and tell you they'll cut while they increase. At least Democrats say they'll increase. But I want to thank Barbara for for putting the organizational side of things together today, and for Sean and Lee for always being there whenever I call, whether as a guest or guests or even filling in for me, which that got me some interesting emails. I take some time off and have these guys take over the show and hand over my airwaves, the 3 hours I'm on a day, to these guys, and they do a fabulous job. And I think what they're able to do, and what many libertarians are able to do, is let people know that, oh my goodness, there's people that think like me, and they're not under a D or an R. What a concept! But as I was in Raleigh the last 2 days, I was doing my show live from the Civitas Conservative Leadership Conference, a national conference. It's a state level type thing, but I had the unfortunate fortune of speaking after Rudy Giuliani the day before this, which basically I was the pee break. I understood my role in that lineup, but what I saw from people at that conference, and I'm not talking about the politicians, and there were many of them, but what I saw from people at this conservative leadership conference was a hunger and a frustration in their eyes. I saw it was like the people lost in the desert. Everyone's walking around. We have to figure out who we are again. Oh, we lost so bad. And I heard one speaker up on the podium in front of 500 people say, do you realize we got our clocks cleaned? We had 2,000 Republicans lose in November of last year. Everybody, oh, I had no idea. And I'm thinking to myself, sitting at my table going, and how many libertarians were wiped out with a swipe of a pen in North Carolina?
Mm-hmm.
You hear me? Were we connected a little bit here? I mean, there's a group of people that are hungry for liberty. And that group of people find themselves under a lot of different labels. And when they asked me for a title for what I want to speak about tonight, I said, well, I don't know. I don't usually know what I'm going to say until I stand up at a podium. I said, but how about the Liberty Coalition? What does that mean? I don't know. I'll figure it out. But you know, it came to me as I've been traveling around the state this week. Chris Fitzsimmons, who is with NC Policy Watch, which bills itself as a liberal think tank, he was pointing out in frustration in his Friday Follies mailer that he sends out online that the General Assembly in their budget talks, that the Council of Seven, or whatever the title might be, of the power brokers and the leadership of the North Carolina House of Representatives decided to pull themselves off into a corner office somewhere and talk about what the budget is going to be. These 7 people, these Democratic leaders, put a big sign on the door that said, keep this door locked. There's a liberal that's pretty upset with the Democrats, too, is hungry for liberty. It may have differing views on the role of government, but the frustration of an unopen government, a dishonest government, and centralization of power and decision-making is prevalent within people that call themselves conservatives, people that call themselves liberals. And I think where they go astray is that they're trusting those frustrations to people that are at the top of political parties. I think that's where their misguided trust is. And so, as I talk about a liberty coalition, I think there's great opportunity for people to step across different labels and really take our state back, take our local governments back, take our country back. It is possible. We've shown throughout history that a few committed, passionate people can change the course of events, can change history. You know, when I first found out about the Libertarian Party, I was in the Air Force at the time. I was a medic in the Air Force for 8 years. And I didn't follow politics or anything like that. But the first time, I got a promotion. I was a non-commissioned officer for the first time, E4. I'm going to get a pay raise. Oh, great, I can't wait. Oh, all of a sudden, I was in a tax bracket. First time ever. I got my first paycheck as an E4, and I looked at it and said, wait a minute, it's no bigger than when I was an E3. It's the same size. I thought I had a raise coming. I just went and bought my nice little Toyota Tercel. I'm so excited. I had car payments now. No extra money to pay the payment. No extra money for the full insurance coverage that was mandated on me. And so I looked around, and I'm like, oh, goodness, what am I going to do? I already bought this thing. I thought they told me I had a raise coming and everything. A colonel that I worked with, Colonel Billingsley, walked over, great guy. But he always had this kind of thing about him. You know, he was always frustrated, always just, you thought maybe the guy was going to implode or explode one day at work. But he would stop, he'd look at you, and he'd deliver a line where you go, wow. Well, I had immeasurable respect for Colonel Billingsley. And when I was scared to death. What am I going to do? What am I going to have a car payment? I don't have any extra money, and because I'm in the military, I can't go get a second job off base. They don't let me do that. So what am I going to do? He handed me a Harry Brown pamphlet. That was my first introduction to the Libertarian Party. What timing! And I was telling Sean and Lee before dinner that actually when I look at that situation and that awakening, that click that all of a sudden happened in that moment. There were some earlier incidents, even when I was 15 years old, where I had inclinations, I had that trigger of libertarian, constitutional kind of frustrations. My first real job other than a paper route was to work in a lumber yard. My best friend and I figured, well, we have 2 weeks, our parents are going to let us work, to make some real money. And we knew that there was a lumber yard that we could get paid $4 an hour and earn a couple $100 in just a couple of weeks. We were excited. We already had money spent in our heads. We're going to get a canoe. That's what we were going to do with the money. So we worked our tails off. I've never worked so hard in my life before, during, or since that time. It was the hardest work I ever did. Coming into the 2 weeks when we went to collect our money, the owner all of a sudden decided, no, I'm going to give you $50 each. Wait a minute. We agreed on $200 apiece for the 2 weeks. It was $100 a week. We worked full time. And his response basically was, well, what are you going to do about it? You guys are 15 years old. Who are you going to call? What are you going to? And look back, that was my first experience with a tax man. My money was taken from me without me having any say or recourse in it. But back to the political parties, and I have to warn you, some of what I want to share with you today, tonight, might be a little bit edgy, but I figure if anyone can handle it, it's libertarians. Political parties, to me, and I mean all parties, I think are counterproductive to self-government. I'm not the only one to feel that way. I wanted to read for you a quote from George Washington. It said, "The disorders and miseries which result with political parties gradually incline the minds of men to seek security and repose in the absolute power of an individual. One person leads the party. You see it all the time on the national level with the Democrats and Republicans. And sooner or later, the chief of some prevailing faction, more able or more fortunate than his competitors, turns his disposition to the purposes of his own elevation on the ruins of public liberty." George Washington in his farewell address. Now, we don't have to look very far in North Carolina to find a perfect example of what he's talking about right there. Jim Black, perfect example. He went on to say, "The common and continual mischiefs of the spirit of party are sufficient to make it the interest and the duty of a wise people to discourage and restrain it." Political parties are the death knell to self-government. And I mentioned Jim Black. Michael Decker just got 4 years. All right. When prosecutors tried to soften the blow, well, he talked to us. Shouldn't send him to jail. The judge said, I'm going to double it. There's a lot of crimes out there. For me, abusing the trust of the people when you're in office is one of the worst. The damage that you do affects thousands. The apathy, the disdain, the discouragement that it gives people, and they're less likely to be empowered to get involved. Well, what does it matter? It's all the same. They're all corrupt. I want to tell you also that in the General Assembly, a high-up leader of the Republican Party stopped by his office and had a conversation with him mentioned something about the Libertarian Party and ballot access, took the opportunity to argue for ballot access. And his response to me was, and you'll love this, I know these guys have already heard this story, but his response was, well, you know they're just Democratic plans. They're a conspiracy of the Democratic Party. He was serious. This was a top leader.
Better funding from them.
Exactly. The Libertarian Party, I believe, this is where we're going to start getting into some edgy stuff. I think one of the frustrations that, that the Libertarian Party membership and supporters of libertarian ideals, like myself, is that we're trying to change a system back to constitutional self-government by a process that's been defined unconstitutionally. Political parties exist nowhere in the Constitution. Nowhere in any of the Federalist Papers, any of the formational things, Declaration of Independence, Declaration of Arms. How many know about the Declaration of Arms? It was the original declaration by our Continental Congress. It was released a full year before the Declaration of the Declaration of Independence. Now, the Declaration of Independence is a political document. It was our case pleading before the jury of the world why it was just and our cause was right for them to support and to not join sides with England to suppress us. It was a political document. The Declaration of Arms from July 5th, 1775, adopted in Philadelphia by our Continental Congress, was a beautiful, passionate, articulate document to the ideals of self-liberty and freedom, the importance of property rights, of gun ownership, of the necessity for posterity's sake to be willing to die for those freedoms. I often wonder why that document is taught in the schools. I'll tell you, in my house, July 5th is when we light our fireworks. And every time that I go before school groups, I'm talking about the Declaration of Arms. In that document alone is the articulation of what you all have adopted into your statements of principles and Libertarian Party's platform. It's right there. It's the Constitution. It's the ideals behind the Constitution, the formation of government, the structure that is set up to validate and protect our individual liberties and mutual protection are articulated there in a way that no other document I've ever read, other than some speeches like "Give me liberty, give me death." That always gets quoted in the schools. How many schools quote the first part of that speech, where they talk about the military forces amassing off our shores? Are they a sign of love? Is this the action of a king who loves his people? Can we apply that to our federal government today? Are the expansions of powers and the arming of the EPA can raid you now with M16s and M4s? Are these the actions of a government that loves and trusts people? In that speech, he said, these cannons could they be pointed at anyone other than us? How else are we to interpret it? The second half of that speech is taught in every school in America. The first half is not. So, let's talk a little bit more about the edgy part. I'm an unaffiliated voter. All of you, in the eyes of power in North Carolina, also are unaffiliated voters right now. In fact, someone joked with me when I said, and I said, well, I'm leaving for Hickory. I'm going to be talking to the Libertarian Party State Convention. I said, why are you wasting your time with them? Wow. It says a lot, doesn't it? That attitude prevails. Go back to what I said about the high-up Republican person who said, well, they're just a Democratic conspiracy. Wasting your time with them. This is the arrogance of people that have been corrupted by power within political parties. As an unaffiliated voter, I can't volunteer. I'm a veteran of Gulf War I. I can't volunteer at the polling stations without a permission slip from a Democrat or a Republican in North Carolina. Can you believe that? I can't even volunteer as a veteran to help people to the voting booth unless I have a sponsor who's a Democrat or a Republican. When you vote, they highlight your name, and then there's someone right next to them, and they have those green log books, and they write your name down. Anyone ever ask what that is? Anybody know? Those are log books that are written by the political parties and sent back to the political party headquarters, the Democrats and Republicans. I challenged them. I said, wait a minute. I'm not in the Democrat or Republican Party. I don't want my name going back to those parties. They have no business knowing whether I showed up to vote or not. I'm not part of their club. Well, I'm sorry, sir, but this is the way we have checks and balances. I said, we? Who's we? Am I not part of the we the people? I don't want you having my name. Where's my right to privacy on this? But the political parties, unconstitutionally, control the electoral process. You look at boards of elections. Even when the Libertarian parties recognized, were there Libertarians on any boards of elections in North Carolina? Cricket, cricket, cricket. There are. How about the unaffiliated voters in North Carolina? Not including yourselves, but the people who choose to put a U on their registration. Do we have any unaffiliated members of boards of elections anywhere in the state of North Carolina? Cricket, cricket, cricket. In Asheville, where I broadcast my show from, the Republican Party is this close to being the third party in Asheville. Now, the second party is actually not a party at all. It's unaffiliated voters. There are more and more districts where unaffiliated voters outnumber Republicans in Asheville. They're very close to catching up with the Democrats in Asheville. There's a paradigm shift going on, folks. People don't trust old parties. And to some of the edgy stuff, I don't think they trust newer parties either. Now, I think you should continue to, and I will continue to be supportive of trying to get ballot access reforms in North Carolina, because the idea that law-abiding, tax-paying citizens that aren't of a private club, whether it be the Democrats or Republicans, which I see them as one big club anyway, just some of them are the Red Sox fans, the other ones are the Yankees fans, but they both play for the same league. The idea that law-abiding, tax-paying citizens are told, you have your set of rules, and us in the private club, we have our set of rules. That is insane. That is insane. And the people are on your side. Anytime, I don't care what kind of political persuasion of a group that I talk to is, and I talk about that situation. I leave the names out of, Libertarian, Democrat, Republican. I just say, what do you think about, being able to run for office and setting up two sets of rules for citizens, for law-abiding, tax-paying citizens, two sets of rules, and we say that all the white people have this set of rules and all the black people have this set of rules. Did you just say that? That's wrong, isn't it? Yes, it is. What if the diversity is measured by ideology rather than skin color? Would that still be wrong? Absolutely. Then why do we allow North Carolina's Democrat and Republican leadership to tell Libertarians they can't be on the ballot? People understand it. They connect with it. They're on your side on this. When we talk about the Liberty Coalition, one of the things that I believe that the Libertarian Party can do is to throw your weight, your organizational capabilities, your passions. Because I'll tell you what, the Libertarian Party works harder than any of these other parties. You do. And by the time people have spent the money that's been raised, by the time people have exhausted themselves in the volunteer process, you just got on the ballot. You have to work harder to get on the ballot than these other folks have to work all the way through and to include the end of their term, and then walk back into if they're not primaried out, an automatic walk back in. How many uncontested races are there in North Carolina? It's pathetic. It is. Because again, the political parties unconstitutionally are controlling the process. That keep door locked sign? That's also what happens when they decide the districts. They say, well, okay, we're going to make these ones safe for Democrats, and we're going to have these ones safe for us. Now let's negotiate over which 6 are going to be competitive. So we know the rest of them there. We agree to the rules of our bout. When boxers go at each other, they negotiate. Now, what are the rules of this bout? It's what the Democrats and Republicans do all the time. In the meantime, voter turnout continues to drop. Voter apathy continues to increase. And the threats to our individual liberties are in more danger every time that cycle continues on. I say again, I think that Americans are frustrated with all parties, the old ones and the new ones. Teddy Roosevelt is a big role model for me. I love that he would step up to a podium and he'd say exactly what he thought. Love him or hate him, he said exactly what he thought, and I respected that. He said, criticism is necessary and useful. It is often indispensable, but it can never take the place of action. You all know what action is. You have to fight harder than anybody in North Carolina to have your seat at the table. And even when you complete that effort, you're still left out. Same thing on the national level. Despite the Libertarian Party being on enough state ballots to win the Electoral College, Libertarian candidates continually are barred from the debates. Why? The Democrats and Republicans control the electoral process. They say, well, they don't have a legitimate opportunity. Well, they don't have a chance of winning. They only have 4% support, 2% support, 1% support. Well, gee, I wonder, if you're using the airwaves of this country to put your candidates out there and pretend that the American people have a choice, well, why don't you think they would have more support? Patrick McHenry, who's a representative from the 10th District for the U.S. Congress, was at this conservative leadership conference. He got up and he made a tax code stump speech. You all would have loved it. He talked about abolishing the tax code, doing away with the IRS, all these different things. And the crowd, 500 people just cheering, yeah, thunderous applause. I stuck my hand in my pocket. Patrick Valentine, who's the Republican candidate for governor last time around in North Carolina, was sitting at my table and he goes, Matt, you don't want to see tax reform? I said, yeah, I would have loved to. You know, and it's interesting that the stump speech comes back now that the Republicans are in the minority. When they were in the majority for the last several years, how much of that did they get done? Cricket. Republicans are really good at adopting libertarian ideals when they're in the minority because the people connect with it. Then when they get in power, well, then you have the scandals that we've seen in Washington, D.C. You see the expansion of government. You see the expansion of civil rights violations. You see all the different things that we've seen over the last several years. That was with a Republican-controlled government, every branch. The Republicans have a credibility problem. They really do. Representative Walter Jones got up and made his stump speech about supporting the troops. Now, for most people here,
that SOB's from my district.
He talked about supporting the troops, and while he acknowledged that there were a number of people at the Conservative Leadership Conference that disagree with his stand on the war, he wanted to focus on supporting the troops and making sure that they get the care they need. As a veteran, I looked at that, and I see my fellow compatriots in arms and the treatment they've been getting at Walter Reed and other VA hospitals. The funding and the accountability of that was under the Republicans' watch. They have a credibility problem. Another prominent member of the GOP got up and talked about abolishing the Department of Education. I've got to tell you, I'll share a little bit of my background here. I've served as a charter school board member and chairman and president of a charter school in Buncombe County. I'm all about school choice. I've also been a homeschool parent. I hear this prominent GOP member get up there and start talking about abolishing the Department of Education, and then I look at the No Child Left Behind Act. It's the greatest expansion of federal education bureaucracy in the history of the country. Again, they have a credibility issue. So I think when we talk about the coalition, the Liberty Coalition, what I go back to and what strikes me is that hunger I saw in the eyes of the people that were at this conservative leadership conference. They were wandering in the desert, lost. They were looking for anybody to come up and say, we're going to follow through. We're going to do this. Why did we lose? Why did we do? They were lost. But the grassroots level people that call themselves conservatives and trust in, a party, they don't know where to turn. I think you guys can give them the place to turn. And it may not be to say, well, become libertarians. Form coalitions around ideas. You've got people that connect. Why do they connect? I pointed out in one of my speeches at the conference, I pointed out to folks that the largest voting bloc in America is the non-voter. It is. Imagine what would happen if that non-voting bloc realized they were the largest voting bloc and felt empowered to get behind something different. This country would change, wouldn't it?
Benchmark.
So then the discussion becomes, well, why aren't they voting? Well, because American Idol, Sinjay, it's all a crapshoot. No, that's not why they're not voting. I believe most people don't vote because they're apathetic to, because of the frustration of thinking it's all the same, it's all corrupt, same old, all the time. Because the Democrats and Republicans have gotten so good at making it sound like they're different and fighting with each other all the time and tearing down every institution of government that nobody thinks there's anything there. Now, I was speaking at, I think it was, I forget which university it was, but I like to do this thing sometimes when I'm with college students. And, we were in a big theater, big full theater type thing, auditorium, and you had the 2 rows going up to the back of the building with the exits back there. And I said, okay, we're going to have a little fun here. Let's loosen up a little bit. I said, okay, you come over here. You stand here. You represent the right wing. All right, yeah, you come over here. You're going to stand this aisle. You represent the left wing. And you come over here. You're everybody else in America. All right? And what we're going to do is we're going to have a race to the exit, all 3 of them. And then this person says, well, wait a minute. They have a head start. Why? I'm going to have a race to the exit. Everybody's all excited. College kids, oh, we're going to see somebody fall down and break their nose. And I said, you ready? Get set. And I reached over and I grabbed the back of the shirt of the person up here. I said, go. And everybody's looking at these two college students are running toward the back of the auditorium, all the way through all the rows. Everybody's watching. And I'm just holding on to this person right here. And they get up to the back. One got there like 2 steps before the other. And everybody's laughing. They're saying, oh, the left winger won. University. I said, would you step to the emergency exit right here, please? The person next to me. They took about 6 steps, and they were standing at another exit. I said, you all were so focused on the 2 exits that you're used to going to, you didn't realize there was one right here next to you. They just went 5 times as far to the same ending point. One got there a little bit quicker than the other, but they were both going the same direction. None of you realized there was another option right here next to you that everybody could see without having to turn around. Well, I'll tell you, there was a blank stare from about 85% of the audience. I could tell that light bulb went off. I said, okay, I now know I won't be invited back to this university because you just thought for yourself. And I wasn't. I've been invited a lot of places once. But again, the opportunity for a Liberty coalition is really where I believe the impact can be. Whether people call themselves conservatives, libertarians, independents, even progressives, there's a lot we can do to build some momentum to get self-government back in the hands of the people. Take any questions? Comments?
I just want to let you know that when we proposed Gary Bartlett, Director of Big Board Elections last week for our lawsuit, he did admit that there were no non-Democrats and non-Republicans on any county boards of elections that he'd ever known of. Although he did point out that many of the directors of county boards are unaffiliated judges.
Well, anybody can put a U on their registration card.
Yeah.
In one of the western counties here, the unaffiliated head of one of the board of elections shares a cabin and sneak-away place with the Democratic leader in the county.
Well, you see, now that's what
They're not in a significant leadership. They're not in a significant documented relationship. But, yeah, anybody can put a U on their registration card. But
explain your relationship with your employer.
my relationship with my current employer?
Yeah.
I show up, I do what I want to do, and they cut me a check every 2 weeks. I actually have to tell you,
Your ratings are good. He's not.
I've got to tell you, actually, I walked into, you heard some of the background, broadcasting out of a shack, and, handing my guests a couple of penicillin pills when they left every time. And when I got the offer to work for WWNC, which is owned by Clear Channel, pretty big company,
Yeah.
I thought, well, and plus the guy I was replacing was hardcore, Republican apologist, right-wing, berate anyone who disagrees with talking points that he had picked up from Rush Limbaugh. I thought, I'm going to last 6 weeks at best. And indeed, there were people that tried. I mean, we had death threats. We had to have security at the radio station. I didn't think it'd last 6 weeks. But for the first time in my 10 years of doing radio in Western North Carolina, since I've been working with Clear Channel, it's the first time I've ever not had a manager come and say, you shouldn't talk about that. Or maybe you should stay away from this one. In fact, I've been encouraged. We were talking about a situation where the city of Asheville, the zoning department had reached a deal, a compromise between the neighborhood coalition and Super Walmart. And they reached the deal to protect the neighborhood, whatever it was going to be. And then 6 months later, the city came around at a midnight meeting hour kind of thing and gave Walmart everything they wanted. Well, I was pretty irate. You know, here was a situation in self-government where people had stood up and they talked about different things. They debated it out, and an agreement was reached. Whether you agreed with the agreement or not, it was reached. And then the city government violated the agreement with the people who put them there. Well, Walmart was an advertiser on my show at the time. I was pretty clear. I gave out phone numbers of executives from Walmart, encouraged people to call and share their interpretation of the situation. And Walmart called the advertising director of the station and said, "We're thinking about doubling our advertising on your program, on your station." And they left the innuendo of, "You're going to have to tone this guy down." Management told them that they were welcome to take their advertising somewhere else, came and told me about it, said, "Go on the air with it." So, yeah, it's opposite of what I perceived as I would have.
That's local management?
That's the local management.
They're telling the local management that free.
Yeah, they do.
I have a couple questions about radio. I did radio for over a year, local radio station where I live. How big's your listening audience? 25, 30,000?
About 35 to 45,000 terrestrial signal from WWNC, but they actually came out with the online listenership ratings nationwide just recently, and my producer and I were actually intimidated to go on the air when we heard that. We're actually the number 43 show in the country. Yeah. That's wild because we're in a 178 market, and we're not syndicated. We're one of the only top 50 that's not syndicated. So we do, and that's why podcasting, streaming is why we had that. But, you know, you talk to, well, why are people listening in? I asked that question after those ratings came out. I threw it out on the air. I said, what in the world? There's got to be a mistake. I think there's supposed to be a 1 in front of that 43 or something. All of a sudden, I get a call from Texas, get a call from Kansas, get a call from Ohio. The 1-800 line's filling up from people listening around the country. And they said, well, because we're learning from you guys in North Carolina. They're saying the same things you guys are dealing with there, we're dealing with here, but you guys are getting people thrown in jail. And so it's the blogosphere and different things, people posting podcasts saying, hey, wow, you're not going to believe what these people in North Carolina are getting done. Wow, you won't believe the reaction of government to the Libertarian Party. They told them they don't exist. Wow. You know, history is determined not by our actions, but by the response of government to our actions. That's what determines history. You know, we wouldn't have had the revolution in America if the Redcoats hadn't shot up all those people in Boston. It was the reaction of government to the assertion of rights by the people that changes the course of history. We're supposed to assert our rights, and then what government does with it is what changes the course of history. But we have to be resolute, and we have to be willing to stand by the assertion of our rights as individuals. You have a second question?
Well, I was wondering what your audience, of course, you're going on simulcast, you're going on, you know, because it was just Rick and myself, and I had an hour, and we wound up doing 2 hours. And we didn't have anybody within our listening audience with the guts to call in.
Not a problem in Asheville.
Okay, it's not a bigger community, I realize that, but what times when we weren't on the air, you really picked up the Public Broadcasting Network or the Genesis Communication Network, and, you know, they're pretty far out there, but I would get this stuff when I walk into a restaurant. They said, heard your show yesterday. Yeah, you're crazy. I'll give you the whole damn hour. You can call me a liar and prove me wrong. They never showed up. Of course, at the time the cops showed up, and I said, officer, is there something I can do for you? And he turned around and walked away. You know, the town hates me. They can't wait till I move.
Can't imagine why.
If you're within the terrestrial signal area, which actually, depending on the weather, can hit East Hickory.
Okay, can I pick up in Perth County?
I don't know, but you can pick it up at matcave.us. Guarantee you can pick it up there. Yeah, and the Matt Cave thing, you know, we're in the mountains. My name's Matt. We call it the studio the Matt Cave, and so it's a whole play on the Batman thing. Batman that looks like a Batman beast. Cliche. We haven't been threatened with a lawsuit yet.
That's when you'll know you really made it, when the Batman people see you.
Well, we had a host from Texas, and this should have been an indication of the hunger that people have out there for the uniqueness. I guess it's unique. People say, well, the show's filling a niche. I said, God, I wish it wasn't a niche. I wish everybody out there was having the open dialogue that we're having on our show. I wish every host was closing the phone lines when people's passions are high and say, don't call me, here's the number of the government official involved. Mm-hmm. I wish every host did that.
I have a question. Do you go to the Talkers Convention and advertise the Talkers magazine?
Waste of time. It's a waste of time in my opinion. There's usually two different kinds of talk radio hosts in my experience. There's the ones who are just, doing the swap shops and talking about, lost dogs and good community radio like that, which is dying. We need more of that. But then the others are trying to be Rush Limbaugh. Same regurgitated stuff, same style over and over again. And whether I'm in front of 1,000 people or if I'm in front of 4, I'm going to tell them I'm actually not that big of a fan of talk radio. It's because I think a lot of it is hurting.
Live, which is your competition?
I'm sorry?
Free Talk Live, are you aware of them?
No. We'll check it out.
They're number 1 podcast.
Yeah, the truth is, I'll tell you, I focus so much of my time into looking on what's happening in North Carolina. It's a lifestyle, and I'm so immersed in it that, people calling about national level stuff. I'm like, you got the wrong show. We're trying to get self-government in the hands of North Carolina people right now, and we'll deal with the national government once we have our state situated. That's the attitude I take to it, because no one's talking about the state general assembly. Nobody. All across the state. That's why as I'm traveling around, as I'm traveling around the state, the reason I'm doing that is the demand there. People are saying, come to Fayetteville, come to Greensboro. We'll talk on my show, we'll talk about Winston-Salem as much as we talk about Wheatonville. We'll talk about Nags Head as much as we talk about Brevard. And the reason is, in North Carolina, the way that government is set up in North Carolina, everything is through the General Assembly. You don't have local government in North Carolina. You're made to think that you do. You don't actually have local government. They are able to operate at the whim and the discretion of the General Assembly, and what you think is a local decision is actually a choice A, B, and C as given by the leadership, the Council of 7, with the keep this door locked sign in the General Assembly. That's why I focus so much to it, because that's where our lives and our liberties are being impacted in North Carolina. And like I said, I wish and pray that my show becomes something that's just everybody's doing it. I would love it, because that means that we have our state back in the hands of the people.
North Carolina hasn't yet.
Fortunately, people in North Carolina still, except for at restaurants, I'm willing to say about the guns. Any other questions? Comments?
One more question? Any more? What time of day are you on?
3 to 6 p.m. Yeah, I'm actually sandwiched between Rush Limbaugh and Sean Hannity. So you can imagine some of the partisan backlash I get, because what I've told you here today is this is me. This is what you get on the radio. This is what you get at a podium. It's what you get if you're sitting on my front porch sharing a drink. And so, yeah, the partisan backlash I get can be pretty immense sometimes, but you have to be willing to endure that. And it's too important. I've got a 13-year-old, a 1.5-year-old, and one on the way. And I'm in the baby-making mode because I'm encouraged for the future of our country. I'm encouraged. What I said about the reaction of government is what sets the course of history. Government's getting pretty damn tyrannical in the United States today, isn't it?
What do you mean giddy?
Getting more. Thank you. They're on the ever increase. Both parties are racing toward that back exit.
Oh, yeah.
I'm sitting here seeing more and more people gathering down here at the front of the auditorium. I'm encouraged. That's why I want to have 4 kids. I'm encouraged, and I see in the General Assembly last year here in North Carolina, they inserted language into the ethics reform bill, which was to hold accountable corrupt politicians. So what did they do? They inserted language to try and make talk radio hosts register as lobbyists. The very people who exposed the corruption, they tried to shut down. They tried to say, you're going to have to register with the state, you're going to have to do full financial disclosures, and, oh, by the way, if you violate any form, you're going to be banned from doing what you do for 2 years in the state of North Carolina. This was the ethics reform bill to lock down the corrupt politicians. But the people who are targeting it and exposing it were the ones that would have been pulled down. That's a reaction. That's a validation from government that they're scared. And when we can get our legislators from your local district more afraid of the people back home than they are the leaders in the Council of Seven in that closed locked room, that's when we'll have our government back. And we're getting there. It is turning around. What they've done to you guys, what they've done to the Libertarian Party, wow, they must have sensed what was coming. They must have seen the writing on the wall going, oh, bleep. They're starting to win the hearts and minds of people. There's more. You realize there's more cars and yards and shirts out there with red, white, and blue on them than people that vote?
Yep.
How do you interpret that? I interpret that people still believe in America. They still believe in individual liberty. So much so that they're proud to put that flag on their clothes. They're proud to put it on their car. They'll put it on their yard. But they're not seeing options provided to them by the political powers that control the electoral process. They don't see anything there that says, I want to get behind that person. That's why you've got to keep the fight up, folks. And while you fight for the ballot access reform, you all are so experienced and so effective at grassroots. That's why I really wanted to impart the edgy part tonight of encouraging you to look at your opportunity for coalition and focusing that networking and the signatures and calling to specific issues. And I know that the Libertarians at times have endorsed different candidates in races where there wasn't a Libertarian running. That's one form of doing that. But expanding on that, I think you can help turn the ship in North Carolina even more rapidly than we're seeing today. So again, thank you for your time. I'm getting the look from Barbara.